Welcome to the Dumb Idea Podcast Show with Mike and Alex. We thank you for joining us as we have a couple of beers and a cigar and talk about what's going on in our lives. Grab an adult beverage and a smoke and settle in with us. Please like, subscribe, and comment on each show so we can hear whether you agree or disagree with our take on things. Listen wherever your favorite podcasts are and at www.dumbideapodcast.com. All right, so we were going to talk about cars, and the main reason being, and this is going to be a departure from what we normally talk about, but the main reason being is because, you know, I've been looking for a car for probably at least 8 months, and I just can't find anything that I want. I don't want to pay for a new car because new car prices are crazy, and then in addition to that, now used car prices are crazy. Now, I took advantage of it back in March because I sold my car because I had a spare car. And I took advantage of it, got paid more than I ever should have for it. But now I'm also looking to replace it, so I'm not driving my beater, basically. The car that we tow behind an RV that probably I shouldn't be putting any more miles on because it's an '08 Saturn with 130,000 miles. This car's already outlived its life probably by about 40,000 miles.
Playing with house money with this car.
Absolutely. I'm playing with house money, but it's paid for, right? So if I put $1,000 into it every year, I'm still less than a car payment. And on top of that, it's already geared up for me to tow it. So the car, it's not a normal car for me where I would just get rid of it, right? All right. But I'm looking for something that I would like to drive. Now, I don't drive that much, so I'm not going to put that many miles on it. And I used to be a big Nissan fan. I had an '01 Pathfinder. I had an '05 Altima with the 5-speed manual. By the way, my Pathfinder, 5-speed manual. Both with a 3.5 VQ engine. One of the best engines alive. All right. Then I went and got an '07 Murano. Same 3.5 engine, but they put the CVT transmission in there, which I'm not a big fan of, but I can't really knock the car. It drove fairly well. It was quiet, sturdy. My wife ended up taking it over. She had an '04 Pathfinder, which was the automatic, though. And after that Murano, though, we pretty much got out of Nissans, except for one. I believe it was a 2012 Altima. Now, this was a 4-cylinder.
CVT car, too?
With a CVT. And I hated that car. I held on to that car. I bought it brand new, and I got out of it within 2 years because the quality issues on that thing were awful. The interior quality was awful. Those zero gravity seats that they're still trying to push onto people are the most uncomfortable seats I've ever sat in. They're like, oh, it takes the weight and transfers it around. Like, no, this is hard as a brick. And so basically, my thing was, what happened to Nissan? Because as I'm looking at some of these older cars, there are plenty of cars out there with 100,000+ miles. And the one brand you really don't see is Nissan.
Yeah, I don't know what their deal is. I mean, I've seen some. I used to like them too. I had an '07 Maxima. Loved that car. It was fast. That 3.5 liter engine was plenty of power. It was a big car too, and it would scoot.
But that had the CVT as well.
Right, it did have
right
the CVT, and it was weird because it had the CVT, but you could also shift the CVT into some sort of sport mode where you'd like shift it.
The fake shift.
Right. So what am I pretending? Is it just stopping shifting when it, or letting it rev out? We got rid of that and we bought a Rogue. That was a 2011, I believe, a 2011 Rogue. It was okay. It was good on fuel. But it was a crossover. I'm not a big crossover fan. Had that car. And then I will say the Maxima, I was not the best on the PMs with it, on the maintenance, and the engine kept running, so I can't complain there. But after that, I think there was one more generation, the '08s and up, and that they looked pretty decent. And then what really turned me off about them was the gimmicky design cues that they put in them. the floating roof line, which I can't stand. And I will rail on for a very long time about the floating roof line, but just some of the gimmicky body lines and stuff like that I didn't like. And then, but you're right, you don't see a whole lot of. You'll see old rental cars that are available used with mileage somewhere in the 30s. You might see a couple, but I don't see a ton of them. The older ones on the road either. Now I'll see the old Maximas.
Sure, yeah.
The old
Those
boxier ones.
Well, the old early 2000s. So the 2000 had the 3-liter V6, and then in 01 they dropped the VQ in it.
Mm-hmm.
Now that 3.5 liter engine they still use in Nissans and Infinitis, and those engines have no problems.
Yeah,
it's the transmission, that CVT that they use from Jatco.
Mm-hmm.
It's just garbage, and they won't get away from it. And I don't know why, because a company like Toyota, they've used CVTs for years in the Prius, but they use them from Aisin, which I think Toyota owns a bit of Aisin.
Okay,
and those are the CVTs that they put in there, and they last forever.
Because Ford was using them in the 500s too. When they first came out with the Ford 500.
Yeah, and that lasted like a year, though.
Yeah, and then I think the Ford Freestyle had it, too, and you don't see a ton of those out there either.
No. Yeah,
So,
well, that 500 was, what was that, the Ford Passat, if you remember right?
Yeah.
Because it had the same design as the Passat at the time. And I think Volkswagen was like, we can't have a Passat looking like a Ford. Like the next year, the Passat went to the style you see probably closer to today, with that huge back seat. The cavern is like a limo in that Passat. But so I always wonder, because in the early 2000s, that's when Nissan got more tied up with Renault out of France, and Renault was known for quality issues. Now I don't know if I think they had the CVT kind of in the plans. And because they were the majority partner, because back then Nissan was in some trouble financially, Renault came in, kind of bailed them out. But I think they forced that CVT on them, because back then Nissan was trying to be like I don't want to say sports family car, but they were more sporty than Toyotas and the Hondas back then.
Yeah, and because they marketed the Maxima. Remember, they had the 4D SC sticker on the back doors of the 4-door sports car.
Sure.
And they had a unique look to them. I never drove one from that genre, but the Renault involvement wasn't all bad, because their design got pretty cool. They did some cool design things, especially when they first brought the Ultima out. And kind of got away from the old jelly bean looking cars and things of the late 90s.
Well, that's why I bought my 2012. I thought it was a great looking car, and to be honest with you, right now, I think the Ultima is a great looking car,
and you get it with all wheel drive too, which is awesome.
And I think you can still get it with the 3.5 in it. The problem is the only transmission you can get is that CVT. Now, if you're buying it new, I think you probably got 60,000 miles to play with, but as soon as your warranty is out, that transmission is a grenade.
Yeah,
and I don't care how good that engine is. If you got to swap out a transmission, that's like a $3,000 to $5,000 job.
Right. And what kind of transmission? It's not like you're going to get a decent used one.
Well, never mind the fact, at that point, a 4-door sedan at that point is worth $5,000.
Yeah.
So you're going to put in work that's equal to the value of the car. At that point, you just get rid of it. I mean, I almost feel like Nissans are like kind of like going the way of the household appliances. Well, with a household appliance, now with a refrigerator, dishwasher, whatever it is, you use it for 5 years and it's meant to be thrown away.
Yeah. It's the planned out. I mean, I remember my parents they had the same appliances forever. Growing up, like they sold their house and it had the same washing machine that was in it when they bought it in the 80s. So now, I mean, I've only owned my house for 10 years, and I think I'm on dishwasher number 2, clothes washer number 3. It's like they just die. And I think maybe that's where Nissan is going, is that it's just going to be or maybe that's what the public wants. You know, you have the primary market that purchases them used or new, and then the leasing and fleet sales, and then they go to the used market, your CarMaxes, your more reputable dealer, you know, your bigger dealers, and then it might get bought a third time before it finally dies.
Yeah, but the whole idea of buying a new car versus leasing it is that you have some value when you're done with it.
Right.
So you can then take that value, use it to basically use that as your down payment on the next car, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if your car is worth $2,000,
yeah,
that barely gets your first 3 payments plus whatever taxes.
Right.
You're not putting a significant portion of money down on that car anymore.
No.
Like whereas if you buy a Toyota, let's say you buy a $45,000 4Runner. I think 4Runners can still be had for $45,000.
Who knows?
The initial person is going to take a huge hit, right? But in 3 to 4 years, that thing's still worth $25,000.
Oh yeah.
You still have some equity to play with.
Yep.
So Nissan's like, nah, forget that.
Well, yeah.
You don't need any equity in this thing in 3 to 5 years.
And especially because the last vehicle that they had, and I don't know a whole lot about their trucks. I'm not a big fan of the Titan. The Frontier's kind of, I mean, they're all. If you rent a truck from Enterprise, you might end up in a Frontier. But I also, you know, the last decent SUV they made was the Xterra, and now I'm a fan of traditional body on frame, capable off road vehicles, and even though I don't do that ever, but it's still to me, if you're going to do it right, and the Pathfinder's now a crossover, probably with the CVT in it.
Well, they switched that after. It was probably like 2013.
Okay.
It was the version right before this one.
Yeah.
That was the last ladder frame one.
Yeah. It was the slab sided bigger one.
It looked awful, by the way.
Yeah.
It was I compared that to probably the old Honda Pilot.
Yeah.
I thought that thing was one of the worst.
No, and the interiors were dreadful.
Oh, they were plastic.
Yeah. Yeah. The fake painted chrome on the steering wheel trim. They were just awful. The Xterra though was a really, especially once the old when Jeep stopped making the Cherokee, the original, the good one, the Cherokee Sport, Xterra kind of was the one that filled that gap because the 4Runners were still pretty expensive. So,
well, yeah, the 4Runner at that point had gone from a $20,000 to $25,000 vehicle up to 45,
right,
50. It was not in that league, but it also, I mean, it got bigger though.
Yeah.
But it was not in the same league anymore, and they replaced that with basically a RAV4, which wasn't going to go off road for anybody.
No.
So Toyota pretty much left a void there. The Xterra came in, and they were almost. I'm trying to think if there was another competitor to the Jeep at the time.
Not really.
I don't think there was,
because they'd all gone to unit body construction on all their SUVs too, except for the
Wrangler.
Wranglers, but they were real expensive. They still are expensive.
Those things are unbelievably expensive.
Yeah,
and the new ones are put together like crap.
Yeah, and there's a thing about those. They're a thing. Like people are all into them, and I don't mind the vehicles by themselves, and I don't mind the people by themselves. But when you get them all together, it's like a big douche fest.
It's another level of bro culture.
Yeah,
it's like Jeep bros.
Yeah, the brodozers.
Yeah. It's a bad combination of brosifs.
Yeah.
They need to check their brosity at the door.
Yeah, but they can't because they're just so into it. But but when they went to, and then you had the Armada, which was a decent sized SUV.
Yeah,
and it really, Tahoe competitor.
Well, that was the built on the Titan chassis.
Yeah, and they were, but again, interiors were dreadful.
They couldn't be any worse.
Yeah, and the Xterra then was I think it shared a lot of the underpinnings with the Frontier.
Yeah,
and it was just a neat vehicle. And of course, then the Pro 4X package was awesome.
Well, yeah, that's what the Jeep guys went. Yeah. They went for that Pro 4X. I mean, I know someone that has it, and all he does is go off roading with it. Like he uses it as it should be used, right? Yeah. And it's dirt cheap.
Yeah,
like you can still get them dirt cheap. Like they don't hold on to value like the Jeeps do.
Yeah,
like a new Jeep Wrangler is crazy to me, and we'll get on Chrysler in a minute. because there's more than one cheaply made car out there. There really is.
Oh yes, plenty.
I'm picking on Nissan because I liked Nissans.
No, I remember when I was in college and a buddy of mine, his mom and dad bought him a car and it was an Altima, and I was like, look at that thing. That's cool.
Yeah.
And this is back in the early 2000s when, I still drove an 87 Camaro, which was awesome. I loved it. T-tops. It had a garbage engine. It had that 5.0 high output. I think it made like 140 horsepower. But it had a manual. It was fun. But, that's what we were driving around in. We're old, the girl I was with at the time, she had a 87 Honda Accord. Like, that's the stuff we had. And then this guy rolls up in this sleek looking car. Like, wow, that is cool. And, so I kind of got into them, and then eventually I ended up buying one, the Maxima. But I'm just disappointed in them now because it's like they're taking gimmicky design cues, and it's almost like they're phoning it in.
Well, the problem with them phoning it in with the Nissan brand is that people are now taking that mentality of what Nissan is to not even cross-shopping Infiniti with luxury brands. Because Infiniti doesn't use the CVT.
No.
They use a regular 7-speed transmission. And by all accounts, they're not bad cars.
No, but they look nice. I can't stand how they changed. You used to be able to tell what they were. The naming made sense.
Yeah, they screwed up with the name.
Now they're all Q, Q what? At least BMW, what a 3. Now BMW's added a whole bunch of different stuff because now they have 1, 2, 3, 4. But at least like a 3 Series. You had a 318 had a 4-cylinder engine. If it had XI, you knew it was all-wheel drive.
Right.
Up to 330 XI.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had M3, M5. Like, you knew what this stuff was. Infiniti with their Q designation.
I don't know what it is anymore.
Yeah, I don't even pretend. The G37 was an awesome car. Or the G35 back when they first came out with it. Then now it's the Q37, which is different than the.
I don't even think it's 37. I think it's Q30, Q50, Q70.
Right.
And then the SUVs are QX30, QX50, QX70.
Right. Why don't you just call it XL? Like my T-shirt is a 3X. That's the big SUV.
Well, the history behind how those names came about was they hired the guy, the design chief, or I believe it was the design chief or they hired him into some high-level executive position over at Infiniti. They got him from Audi, and that's how Audi was naming their stuff. Now, Audi at least had the A for sedans and Qs were SUVs.
Right.
This dummy comes over and just says everything's got a Q in it.
Right.
And everyone's like, a Q30, what kind of engine is that guy? Yeah. At least with the G35 and G37, I knew it had a 3.5 or 3.7 liter VQ engine in it.
Yeah.
I knew the engine it was in there.
Yeah.
Like with the M, it was either M35, M37, or M45. So that was the 3.5, 3.7, or 4.5 liter engine. And I knew the M was bigger than the G.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there were only 2.
Right.
Other than that, I think there was the G had a coupe. But,
right.
But that was it.
And back when they first started, because I remember when Acura, Lexus, and Infiniti started back in I guess it was the late 80s for Acura. Lexus wasn't that far behind. And
Lexus was 90s. It was like mid-90s,
yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah. And then then Infiniti came in. They had the J and I and some other stuff, but you kind of knew what they were. And I think the later in the alphabet you got with them, the bigger the car got.
Right. So the Q was the boat.
Yeah.
The I was the small one.
Yeah.
And the J was the middle.
Yeah, because my a friend of mine growing up, his mom had one. It had the analog clock in the dashboard. They were decent, but you could tell. I mean, you could tell it was essentially, it wasn't anything that different than anything Nissan. Then they split apart or not split apart, but they kind of made the departure, and they had, the Infinitis were rear-wheel drive sedans. They were sporty.
They were not built on the Nissan platform anymore.
No, it had the same switch gear and stuff like that, which they all use. But
there was a point though where the Infinitis didn't even have the same steering wheels.
Right.
Didn't have the same center console. Like it was different parts. Mm-hmm. Now some of like the power mirror switch might have looked the same.
Yeah.
but the steering wheels were different. Whereas where it got later on, you could tell that the Infiniti FX steering wheel was the same as the Muranos.
Right.
Like it had that same T thing, the T symbol in the thing. The center console looked exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, why am I going to buy an Infiniti when I can get a Nissan? And from my point of view, when I'm sitting in it, it looks like the same car.
Yeah. And when you go back to look at Cadillac, when Cadillac, all the switch, everything was just, all they did was slap, like the Cadillac Cimarron was a Chevy Cavalier.
Right.
It was a disaster.
Them and Ford finally figured it out after 2008, after the economy collapsed. They figured out we can't do badge engineering.
Right.
So they started to differentiate, and that's, to be honest, for Ford, that's when Lincoln's actually, the price started going up.
Yeah.
Because at one point they had the Ford Fusion, the Mercury Milan, and the Lincoln Zephyr. Mm-hmm. And they were all exactly the same.
Yeah.
Like the design looked the same.
Yeah.
It was like you didn't do anything but slap a badge on it, hence the badge engineering. The next version of it, though, when the Fusion got kind of like the Aston Martin look, well, the MKZ, by this time Mercury's gone, the MKZ got that really sleek look to it.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the best designed cars on the road, even now. I think it was the 2013 MKZ. From all angles, that car looks nice. And the interior looks nothing like a Ford. Maybe the steering wheel a little bit.
Yeah, but no, it definitely, because I have a Fusion in it. It looks, they are different. And
even though the Fusion on its own has a nice look to it.
No,
like that Aston Martin look with the open mouth in the front, not the Lexus type open mouth, but the Ford's open mouth front.
Yeah,
looks nice. They did it correctly.
Yeah, they didn't screw that one up, and it's not a bad car to drive, but you can definitely tell the difference between the Lincoln, and thankfully Lincoln's going back to names rather than MK. And again, the whole, what is it?
Right.
Like I can't, at least like BMW, Audi, Mercedes Benz, you can tell there's some logic to it. But an MKZ is different than an MKT and an MK. How? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, they were just using the last letter, but everything had the MK. It's like, no.
Right. And I guess that is paying homage to and it wasn't Mark K, like the old Lincoln Mark 8, which I love the Mark 8. But at least that now they're starting to change, like the Lincoln Continental. It's got the door handles on it. It's a cool looking car.
Sure.
I guess they're getting back to Aviator, Navigator, so what. Now they always kept the Navigator name. They never switched that one out.
You can't get rid of it. Just like Cadillac never got rid of the Escalade name.
Yeah,
they still won't.
Yeah, and it's almost, you have to keep it when you're charging $100,000 for these things.
Well, at that point, it's not only brand loyalty, it's model loyalty.
Yeah,
like people want the Escalade. They don't want some new named Escalade. They want an Escalade.
Right.
People want a Navigator.
Yeah.
Just like for me, I used to have a Lincoln Aviator. Mm-hmm. That was basically like, it was a little bit stretched and a gussied up Explorer. Mm-hmm. It was a 2005. Last year they made it. They only made that thing for 4 model years. To me, it was one of the most elegant looking SUVs because it didn't look gargantuan like a Navigator, but it took the same design cues from a Navigator.
Yeah, it did.
It was a really sleek looking SUV. Wish I hadn't gotten rid of it, because I thought the transmission was going. Just come to find out, it just shifts hard because that's the way that transmission is. And I freaked out and I got rid of it. Dummy me.
I had an Explorer Sport. It was the 2-door.
Yeah.
And I got rid of it. In fact, I got rid of it and I bought that Maxima, and I still kick myself because it was a nice little truck. It was fun. I don't say it's fun to drive, but
they used to make it a 5-speed.
Yeah.
You could get that with a manual back in the day.
Yeah. Mine was definitely an automatic, but the Eddie Bauer, it had all the leather and
those were nice.
That was the first like real car I ever bought. I had another Camaro that, it was starting to fail on me. I was like, it's time to. I just graduated from college. Like, it's time to get a grown up car.
You were living that dream.
Yeah,
you were living your Camaro lifestyle.
That other one was an IROC too.
Oh,
so IROC Z28. It was fast, but definitely it was time for a grown up car.
Right.
For going to job interviews and doing things like that. So I needed to get something better, and I had that. But if Nissan is on its way down, which I think
they're already down.
yeah.
I mean,
And-
I don't think people are buying them, which is why they're still having financial issues.
well, I think in the people that are buying them, they're buying it because of crazy financing.
Oh, yeah, the 0% financing, or or Nissan's giving huge rebates on them.
Yeah.
Where you can get a new Altima rather than it being a $28,000 Toyota or $28,000 Accord. You could pick up an Altima with the incentives and everything.
Yep.
You're probably picking it up for low 20s. And that's a significant savings.
Yeah, and I think they're, I think they're kind of liberal with their financing as to who they'll
finance.
yeah, and then they're also the other part with Nissan going down like that is what happens to Infiniti, because now if you go to Hertz or Avis, if they have a luxury brand available,
it's an Infiniti.
it's going to be an Infiniti.
Right.
And now they're going to have the rental car, so it's going to drive the value of those vehicles down. So after that, how long do they keep making Infinitis, which is actually a decent car?
Yeah, I mean, they get reviewed really well. The problem is you can't get anyone in the door to cross-shop it from something reliable like a Lexus, something a little more sporty like an Acura, or something even more like a Cadillac or a Buick.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a sad day when you can't even get cross-shopped to a Buick.
Right.
Right? Think about it. Buick isn't even the top brand for GM.
Right.
It's always been known as a middle of the road, not quite luxury, not quite mainstream, right? And I think that's who Infiniti is now actually cross-shopped against.
Yes. Because I definitely don't think they're in the same league as BMW and Mercedes-Benz.
No. I mean, BMW's kind of got its own little niche, and that's who Infiniti went after them with the G.
Yeah.
They went after the 3 Series with the G35, and they did very well according to like Motor Trend, Car and Driver. They always were saying, "Oh, it's right there. It's almost at the 3 Series level.
Right.
It's just not quite there, but it's almost there."
Yeah.
And then they screwed it.
Yeah.
And now nobody's even cross shopping against the BMW.
Yeah, and if you can go to CarMax and pick up a 2-year-old Infiniti for $20,000, I mean that's
it's not a bad
if
deal.
If you care about that, having that image of you're driving a luxury car or sport sedan or whatever you think it is, then why even bother buying a new one?
Well, but here's where the name issue comes in. Let's say I go onto something like Car Gurus, or even if I go on CarMax.com, and you want to search by make and model. So you do make, you put in Infiniti, and then it comes to model.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know which one I'm looking for.
Right.
I don't know which one.
Yeah.
Like before, I knew I could type in Infiniti, or I could select Infiniti, and then I would select the M35.
Right.
And I knew what I was looking at.
Yeah.
If I go in there now and I select Infiniti, do I put in Q70?
Right.
Or is Q70 not the M? Like what is the M? What replaced the I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows?
So you want to know what I do? I just skip it all together.
Yeah. So why bother?
I'm not gonna bother.
And when I bought my last car, I wanted an all-wheel drive sedan, and the only reason I looked at them at all was because Infiniti does have all-wheel drive sedans.
Right.
They also have an all-wheel drive hybrid in a sedan, which is also that was the only one I could find. The Fusion is not available in all-wheel drive as a hybrid. The Nissan Altima wasn't available because I was looking at used cars, so that was new for 20 or 21. Mm-hmm. Now the Camry's now available with all-wheel drive, but to see okay, I can get an Infiniti. I forget which Q it was.
Sure. Whatever the M is.
Yeah, hybrid.
An M all-wheel drive, whatever that is.
Yeah.
It's a nice car.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. But I was like, I don't really feel like getting into it. So I ended up with a Fusion. But, if they're on their way down, it's also neat to see who's on their way up. Because we would have never been having this if we had this conversation 25 years ago, we would have said, well, what's a, Nissan? Oh, they're great.
Right.
And Hyundai and Kia, like, ugh.
Nobody wanted those.
No.
Nobody.
I remember they were doing a sale. You get a Hyundai Elantra GT. It was like a hatchback version of it. and there's a dealership where I grew up that was doing them it was 2 for 1. If you bought one, they'd give you another one. Like they're giving you a 2 for 1 deal. And my dad almost went down there and did it.
Right.
He's like, well, your mom needs a new car, and why not? So the 2 for 1 deal on a car.
Well, now, Hyundai is a brand people want.
Yeah.
Kia is a brand people want. My parents, the last 3 cars they've had have been Kia minivan, Kia Sorento.
Mm-hmm.
And they, not that they're tough on their vehicles, but they never had issues with them.
Right.
The first Sedona minivan they got, I think, was back in 2006. They ran that to about 150,000 miles. Didn't do anything but maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Second Sedona, same thing. Now the Sorento, they also haven't put in. My mom's put 15,000 miles on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 2017. 5 years.
Yeah.
She put 15,000 miles.
Yeah.
Right? So who knows what's going to happen with that one. And we could talk about direct injected engines and what that is doing to engines in general, because that's what Hyundai and Kia are putting in their cars now. Probably a different show, right?
Yeah.
But the quality of Nissan in general, the transmissions, I mean, it's almost like Chrysler with their electrical components.
Mm-hmm.
Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, the newer ones, ever since they went through that whole issue with Mercedes to Cerberus to being bought out by Fiat. Well, unfortunately, I mean, I think the 300, the Charger, even the Grand Cherokee, the Durango, I think they're really nice looking cars.
They are.
And when you sit in them, they feel more upscale.
Yeah, and the interiors are great.
They look great,
yeah.
right? So what's the problem with them? One, they want a lot of money for those cars. One, the Chrysler 300 is the only Chrysler sold.
Mm-hmm.
The Charger, they don't. I mean, that's the small. These are full size sedans. They're only rear wheel drive.
Yep.
Which kind of hurts them in the northern climates.
I mean, you can get all wheel drive on the 300 and the
can you now?
Charger.
You used to not be able to. But
yeah, they switched that up but again, it's such a small model line.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you start at full size sedan, and then for Dodge, it's Charger, Challenger, Durango.
Yep.
For Jeep, it's Cherokee. I think they have like a Compass or Patriot with
There's
no one
Compass.
wants.
Yeah, they have a bunch of weird little crossover things.
And the Grand Cherokee, and then the Jeep lineup.
Yeah.
Right. The problem with them though is with all these new techie interiors, they're putting in like high gauge wire. High gauge means smaller wire.
Mm-hmm.
It can't handle the electrical load, which burns out the components, and within 4 to 5 years, the cars are trash.
And how much would it cost to just use a different gauge wire?
To be honest, and this is what kills me. That whole group could probably increase the reliability of those cars for maybe $500 a car.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think it would be that much.
Yeah.
I really don't. I think for what they buy gauge wire for, probably under $250 a car.
But the thing is, they're just looking at their profit margins,
Of course.
and people aren't buying them. So if you look at it was the Challenger Hellcat was the the stupid high powered engines, and I mean they're cool. Don't get me wrong,
But that's how they're getting you in.
oh yeah, and you don't care,
But they know this car isn't going to last 5 years.
right?
How many used Dodges do you see with 100,000 miles out there?
Yeah,
2 in a
Right.
50-mile radius
Yeah.
of your home?
yeah, not many.
Same thing with Chrysler.
Yeah,
Now, Jeeps are a different story, but let's face facts. Fiat bought that group, Dodge, Chrysler, Ram, Jeep, whatever you want to call it.
mm-hmm.
They bought it for Jeep
yeah,
because Jeep is a cash cow. No matter how poorly you make those, Jeep bros will buy Jeeps.
oh yeah.
Now, I love my brother, but dude's got 2 Jeeps.
Your bro's a Jeep bro.
My bro's a Jeep bro. But they were Jeep bros before Chrysler did what they did. They had older Jeeps.
Yeah,
Like my brother's father-in-law had a 1999 Jeep, which he uses as a tow car that he towed behind his RV, and that's another reason why Jeeps are so popular, at least in the RV community, is you can tow them 4 flat.
right.
You don't need a tow dolly. You can just hook them up and go, which is great.
Yeah.
But they don't make them. Like, that 4-liter V6 is gone.
Oh, that.
They're using that Pentastar 3.6 liter.
Yep. That 4.0 liter, that inline 6 was a tank.
You couldn't.
That thing was indestructible.
The car was rusting out around it before that engine would die.
Yep. And they put it in the Cherokee too. Mm-hmm. And they were just great.
They put it in the Grand Cherokee too.
Yep.
They were in almost all those things.
They were great engines. My sister had she had a couple old Cherokees that she lives in West Virginia. She'd drive those things around and just beat the crap out of them, and they would just keep going. And now it's the same engine that was in our old Town and Country. Mm-hmm. So you're going to take that engine out of the Town and Country. It's the same V6 you put in everything, and just going to put that in the Jeep.
Right.
That inline 6 was torquey. It had a lot of low end grunt to it. That was a
you weren't winning races off the line.
No,
it reminded me of the old early 2000s 4Runner engine. Mm-hmm. I test drove one of those when I was looking, and when I eventually bought my Pathfinder. And I remember stepping on the gas during the test drive, and just being like, this thing isn't moving. like I was trying to make a left-hand turn across traffic, and I'm like, please go faster. I thought I had plenty of room. I did not, apparently.
Just wasting gas and making noise, but you're not going anywhere.
It made a lot of noise. When that cooling fan, man, you step on the gas, it's like, whoo, and I thought the engines weren't up. No. It's just the radiator fan making some noise for you. I'm like, oh, come on. But yeah, so I ended up not buying that, which I probably should have, because it'd still be worth like $20,000 today. Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. This thing's whole value crazy.
And I looked at them when I was having to replace my second car, and I was, maybe I'll get into one of these, and I couldn't really go and justify spending that kind of coin on a vehicle that had that high mileage on it, and especially if it was going to have to be daily. If it was something I was going to play with and lift up and put some new tire and kick around in the weekend, sure, right. I'll throw some money, do that, but not for something that's got to get me to work every day.
So kind of going back to my car, I don't want to say buying experience because I haven't bought anything. So I ended up kind of looking at older cars. Mm-hmm. Like, I started looking for the early 2000s or mid 2000s, and I ended up coming across a gem. 85,000 miles. It's 2002 Acura RL.
Okay.
That was before the body change with the kind of little bit of a beak grill.
Stupid. Yeah, why they did that. The corporate face, don't get me started.
So that RL has a cult following, because I used to own an RL. I had a 2006. Before it was after the body change. Before they put the stupid beak.
Yeah.
It was the beginnings of the beak, but not the crazy looking beak that all Acuras got eventually.
Yeah.
I love that RL. It was a 2006. Don't get me wrong. The interface for the radio and everything, it looked like it was straight out MS-DOS, right? It looked awful. But the car had 300 horsepower, mm-hmm. all-wheel drive, mm-hmm. and it would move. And the funny part, it was one of those sleeper cars that was like, you pull up next to it, it looks like grandma's sedan.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, it just torches you at the line.
Yep.
Because it's got 300 horsepower, close to 300 pound-feet of torque, mm-hmm. and you stepped on that gas and it went. Now, the older one, the 2002, it was actually the Lexus LS Fighter back then.
Okay.
That's what they built it for. It was meant as a luxury driver, but those things have a reputation for, one, being bulletproof, mm-hmm. two, still being desirable today. Like, to the point where that old of a car, what price do you think they have on that thing?
What, for a 2000?
2002 with 85,000 miles. What do you think the price? What price do you think it should have
for something like that? I don't know, maybe $4 or $5,000.
Right.
Yeah.
They want $7,000.
Oh wow. Okay.
They want double that. Now it's been sitting for a month, mm-hmm. which is I got it queued. I got it saved. Right. I'm waiting for the price to go down in case I decide to pull the trigger. I probably won't, because I'm still afraid of buying an 18-year-old car, right. 19-year-old car at this point. Yeah. I'm afraid of buying one. But to me, it looks and probably drives better than anything newer I'm going to get.
Well, and that's the other thing with these newer cars is like the waistlines are so high, the windows are so small, and there's actually some reason that a friend of mine he he does accident reconstruction. He actually goes to crashes and uses math and physics and science to figure out what happened in the crash. But we were talking about that, and the cars back then in the early 2000s, like you saw a greenhouse almost. And now the cars, they have these gun slit windows. And part of the reason is to keep occupants inside the car in a crash. Mm-hmm. The smaller the window, the less likely you are to come out of it.
Right.
But those cars, like they still felt like cars. Like if you go and look at like an old Integra, it's still like it's got windows and you can see outside of it. It's not like you're sitting in this, looking out these little gun slit windows.
So back in the day, like I shouldn't say back in the day, it's probably like 6 years ago, I kind of rehabbed an old 2004 TL, so 2003 TL, just before the body changed that. There was something comforting about sitting in that TL, and when you turned the key, it was the familiar bing bongs. It started right up. It was comfortable, and this was a TL. This wasn't even the RL.
Yeah.
The TL was a really great car too. Unfortunately, back then the TLs were plagued by the transmission issues. Now, luckily, you can replace that transmission pretty cheaply. Mm-hmm. So if anyone out there, if you can find a TL with about 80,000 miles on it, if you can find one with a blown transmission, buy it for about $1,200, $1,300 at most. You can do a transmission swap in that thing for $1,500. Maybe $2,000, and you'll have a beautiful driving car for maybe $3,000 to $5,000. Now, it will drive forever.
Was the TL, was that similar to the Accord?
Yeah, so the TL was
because the TSX was essentially the Euro Accord.
Right, it was smaller than the US Accord. Yeah. I think the Accord was the TL. The RL was, well, to be honest with you, I don't think Honda makes a bigger car than the Accord. So I actually think the RL was similar to the RL was similar to the Accord size-wise.
Okay.
But to be honest with you, I don't think they shared any components.
Right.
I think they were completely separate cars because the TL and the RL were almost the same size.
Yeah, because Acura didn't do that. I remember when Lexus first started, and you could definitely see Camry in
the ES.
Yeah.
It was front-wheel drive, too.
Yeah.
And you shared the architecture.
And you could see Cressida remember the Toyota Cressida? You could see that.
The Corolla.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you had the Avalon was, there's some.
It was the LS.
Yeah. But now it's different. And I don't think, because the Integra was never.
Size,
the Integra was never a Civic.
No.
They were different vehicles.
But now, though, it's different because the LS is rear-wheel drive based.
Right.
Whereas the Avalon is front-wheel drive based.
Yeah.
So size-wise, yes, they're similar.
Yeah.
But architecture-wise, they're not.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they've definitely differentiated their mainstream brand from their Lexus brand. You know what I mean? And Acura, to an extent, has done that. I mean, they've gotten a little lazy lately. Whereas I think in the early to mid 2000s, they were doing much better. Now it's a little bit more lazy.
Yeah.
Ford Lincoln, I mean, essentially an MKZ is still a Fusion, right?
Right.
But they put a completely different skin and interior on it. So from the wheels to like the base plate is the same.
Mm-hmm.
The engines, I think, are different because you could get the 3.5 liter in the MKZ. You couldn't get it in the Fusion.
Right.
I think the only two that were shareable was the MKZ hybrid and the Fusion hybrid.
Right.
Those are the two most similar. Everything else, they didn't share components other than that. But I mean, I wish Nissan would make a comeback because, like I said, right now I think the Altima is one of the best looking cars.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really nice looking car. The Maxima, I could care less.
Flying roofline.
Yeah.
Asymmetric wheels. No thanks.
The Murano, I think the Murano looks nice, even with the floating roofline.
How about the Murano Cross Cabriolet?
Listen, I think that's a sleeper. And the only reason why I say that is because in this day, back in the 50s and 60s, there were convertible cruisers where you could fit 3 people in the back, 2 people in the front, and you could cruise, right?
Yeah.
Nowadays, think about the convertibles out there.
Yeah, I guess the ones that were most recent would have been like, if you remember, like the Oldsmobile Cutlass, the Cutlass Supreme convertible.
But think more recently though. I'm talking about like today, or not today. Even like within the last 20 years, you had a Saab 9.3, which wasn't very big. You could put maybe 2 kids in the back, right? You couldn't put adults in the back.
You got the BMW, the 330 Ci. Those are
you can't put adults.
I mean, you can't put them. Those are the hard top convertibles, and when the top's down, the trunk is absolutely full of Didn't Volkswagen have a convertible with a CC or something? What was that?
Not the CC. It was the Beetle. The
right.
new
Didn't
Beetle.
they have a sedan convertible or coupe convert?
The EOS.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was 2-seater.
Yeah.
There was no back. I mean, there was a back seat, but there wasn't a back seat.
It's a back seat for insurance purposes, so they can say it's there.
The only other one, and this is going to take you back, the Chrysler Concorde JXI.
Okay.
Which was a Dodge Intrepid.
Yeah.
Back when they made that. That's how far back we got to go.
Yeah, wow, okay.
So, if you now want a family convertible, which I think there's probably a niche for, you're either looking at a Range Rover Evoque,
which is going to die.
The second you drive it off the lot, it will break. The suspension will just deflate on you. The air suspension will just go down.
Right.
Or the Nissan Murano Cross Cabriolet.
Yeah, which they don't even make them anymore, do they?
No, they do not.
Yeah. They're hideously ugly.
They're awful looking. But for the purpose of what it was, a family car that you could take out and cruise with the top down.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I actually saw one of those in the wild a couple weeks ago.
Someone owns one around here.
And I looked at it and I was like, I'd forgotten they made them. And it's, other than the fact that it's hideously ugly, it is almost completely forgettable.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing remarkable about it except for the fact that it is ugly. But maybe you're right. Maybe it is something that people are going to, I want a convertible that I could take the kids out in, but I still want to be useful and
I still want to be modern.
Yeah.
Right? Like I want a modern version of a top-down car.
Yeah.
I want the wind in my hair.
Right. Because everything else are like a Miata, which I don't fit in a Miata.
Never mind that. I never told you this story. My dad used to have a convertible Corvette, and he had it down in Florida. And my wife and I went down there before we had kids. And now we didn't have to rent a car. He was like, no, you can use the Corvette. It'd be great. Okay. We left the top up. We didn't even put the top down. I sat in that thing. Drove it on I-4 in Florida. I thought I was going to die. My head was not higher than the 18-wheeler's wheel or the tires.
Do the old movie thing where you drive under the trailer.
You know what? I was thinking a little Fast and Furious. I was like, you know what? There's traffic here. I'm going to slide under this semi-trailer. I'm going to come out the other side. Be awesome. Meanwhile, I would have died.
Right.
And we just would instant death.
Yeah.
Right?
The landing gear of the trailer would have taken you out.
So, but for me to get a sport convertible, not happening. Right. I don't want to have my life flash before my eyes because I got to drive on I-4 in Florida. It was like I think I got a little bit of anxiety driving it. And I only want like 20 minutes. But I do. I wish Nissan would make a comeback. I think they're wasting that 3.5 liter engine, and they make some nice looking cars. They need to get rid of that CVT transmission, or at least get a better one in there.
Yeah, I think they're too big to. I don't want to say too big to fail, but I think they are too big. I don't think the thing is like you had other like Isuzu. No one buys now. Isuzu makes great diesel engines.
Yeah.
And trucks.
But no one's buying one here.
But no one's buying their, remember the Isuzu iMark and some of the Joe Isuzu with his commercials, like no one's buying them. Mitsubishi's about gone.
They were, and Mitsubishi was big.
Yeah.
They were big. Everyone knew about someone who had an Eclipse.
Oh yeah.
And
the Diamante.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The Galant was a nice looking car before they ruined that too.
Yeah.
But now look at it.
I mean,
they're almost out of the United States.
And the Evo, the Evo 8, Evo 9, they were cool. I mean, they were performance cars, but now
if they can go though,
yeah, if
they can leave this country,
yeah,
because we're just not buying their stuff, Nissan can go too,
yeah,
because nothing's stopping them, and Kia and Hyundai are eating their lunch as far as sales go.
Yeah.
You have more competition now than you did back in the 80s and 90s. And if you're not putting out something that is at least somewhat reliable, and I'm not saying all cars are, because, I mean, Toyota's the king of it, right?
Right.
But at least these other companies have started, they put out stuff that's somewhat reliable.
Yeah.
And if you're just going to put out junk, people are eventually going to know. And that, like I said, when people are looking for 100 cars with 100,000 miles plus on them, because that's what they can afford right now, and your brand isn't out there, well, eventually when they can afford a newer car, they ain't looking for you anymore.
Yeah, they're going to forget about you.
And I mean, I'm not saying Nissan's going to be gone, but I think they're going to struggle to get more sales in this country.
Or they'll get to the status where Hyundai and Kia were 25 years ago. So they're going to be down like, what was it, the Kanye West song, Win the Super Bowl and drive up in a Hyundai?
Right.
So
they drive up in a Nissan, right? They're going to have to change their name back to Datsun if they don't get this right.
Right. Well, if they do that, maybe they can bring back the 280.
Right. Or just bring back the old station wagon, for crying out loud. But there's not much more we could say about this. I mean, unfortunately, rip to Nissan. Rest in peace, because I don't see you guys coming back. And hopefully Chrysler, you're not going the same way, but I think Jeep's going to keep them afloat. And, I guess Mitsubishi, it was nice knowing you. But thanks for listening, and we appreciate you joining us. If you can, like, subscribe, share this video, this podcast or video if you're watching on YouTube, dumbideapodcast.com. And we just appreciate you coming and hanging out with us.